Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the August 15th, 2022 meeting of the Menlo Park Planning Commission. We are glad you've decided to join us this evening. Established by state law, our Planning Commission is composed of 7 volunteer voting age residents of Menlo Park appointed to 4-year terms by our City Council. Our Planning Commission is not a policy setting body, that's the City Council. We're a policy implementing body. We review development proposals on public and private lands for compliance with the city's general plan and zoning ordinance, which can be found on the city website. The commission reviews all development proposals requiring a use permit, architectural control, variance, minor subdivision, and environmental review associated with these projects. The commission is the final decision-making body for these applications unless appealed to the City Council. The commission also serves as a recommending body to the City Council for major subdivisions, rezonings, conditional development permits, zoning ordinance amendments, general plan amendments, and the environmental reviews and below market rate or BMR housing agreements associated with those projects. We work in close partnership and we greatly rely on the staff of our city's planning division, which is responsible for coordinating the enforcement of the city's zoning ordinance and related policies concerning applications for residential, commercial, and industrial development projects. If this is your first time joining a Planning Commission meeting this evening, we are very glad that you are here and we encourage your active participation, whether you're an applicant or interested member of the public. And to learn how to do that, I'm now going to turn to Associate Planner Chris Turner to explain how members of the public can participate during various public comment periods this evening. Mr. Turner, welcome and thank you for your help tonight.
Thank you, Chair DeCardi. Regarding the procedures for communicating tonight, the commissioners will have their webcams on during the duration of the meeting. For those presenting on an item on tonight's agenda, we ask that you also turn on your microphone and webcam during the presentation of your item. A member of staff will assign you keyboard and mouse controls if you are displaying a presentation. We kindly then ask that you turn off your webcam and microphone when done with the presentation portion of your item, unless called upon by the chair. During the public comment period, members of the public will have an opportunity to share their comments or questions by clicking on the hand icon on the bottom of your screen, upon which staff will introduce you and activate your microphone. Alternatively, if you are calling into tonight's meeting, you can click *9 on the keypad of your phone, and that will notify staff that you would like to give public comment. If multiple people are speaking from the same account, please let us know at the beginning of your time and we'll make sure that each person gets a chance to speak. And with that, I will hand it back to you.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Turner. Really appreciate your help on that. So let's do our first item of business, which is roll call. I'll ask each commissioner to unmute themselves and verbally respond to assure that your mic is working. I will do my best to go in alphabetical order, which I mess up all the time. Commissioner Barnes, have you joined us so far? I do not believe so. So Commissioner Doe, good evening.
Present.
Terrific. Vice Chair Harris.
Here. Hello, everyone.
Commissioner Riggs.
Present.
Commissioner Thomas.
Present.
And we know that Commissioner Tate will not be joining us this evening. I am the chair, Chris DeCardi. My pronouns are he, him. And it looks like we have 5 of the 7 commissioners present. So for reports and announcements, I will turn to Acting Principal Planner for our city, Corinna Sandmeyer. Over to you.
Yes, good evening, Chair DeCardi and Commissioners. I don't have any updates today, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Terrific, thank you. Any questions from commissioners? I'd like the record to note that Commissioner Barnes has joined us. Commissioner Barnes, do you want to just turn on your mic, make sure we can hear you?
Yes, thank you, good evening.
Good evening, terrific. You've just missed the introductions and roll call. Any questions for Ms. Sandmeyer at this time? I have one. Ms. Sandmeyer, we had a follow-up to the Planning Commission from an item on our agenda last time regarding a project that had a heritage tree removal and an ADU. And I wondered if you could just, and their concern, which went to all of us on planning, was that the Planning Commission had not paid attention to that item. And I remember the back and forth in the discussion that there was some, I think, clarification needed about, because of the ADU, whether in fact that was in our jurisdiction to talk about that particular heritage tree. Given that we have items tonight that also have heritage trees, I wondered if you could just clarify what is our role and what is our opportunity for discussion about various heritage tree decisions associated with the projects we see.
Yes, so if a heritage tree removal permit is approved by the city arborist for development related action, that's also discretionary, such as a single family home that requires a use permit, then the Planning Commission essentially takes the final action on it, because if the commission doesn't approve the use permit, then the heritage tree removal permit is not in effect because it's no longer needed. ADUs at times may be discretionary. I don't think we've had one recently. So the one that I think the discussion was focused on July 25th, that one was not discretionary. So that heritage tree removal permit was development based, but it wasn't related to a discretionary action directly. Although the single family home that the ADU is to be attached to was a discretionary action. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, terrific, thank you. Commissioner Barnes, you had a question to Sandmeyer. Excuse me, Commissioner Riggs, I apologize. Commissioner Riggs, I believe you're still on mute.
Thank you, that happens. So for Ms. Sandmeyer, I think the wording of non-discretionary can make the communications difficult to understand. I thought I understood from our attorney, Ms. Doherty, that the discussion of placement of an ADU is not necessarily considered a non-discretionary subject if an equal and similar ADU can be created on another part of the site. So could you just confirm for the commission and the public that, and this specifically relates to the project 2 weeks ago, that the placement of the ADU was not under the auspices of the Planning Commission?
Yes, so if the ADU is following all the regulations in the municipal code and not asking for any exceptions, then the placement of the ADU is not discretionary. If there's a case where a single family home requires a use permit, the location of that home is discretionary.
So the placement of the ADU appeared to be simply a choice of preference, not of necessity on the previous project. And that choice of preference, not necessity, resulted in the condemnation of the heritage tree. So again, was the design of the home which put the ADU in conflict with the tree, or in apparent conflict with the tree? It actually was only adjacent to the tree. Was that not reviewable as part of the design of the home?
Okay, so I want to be careful not to discuss items that aren't agendized. But in general, if there is a use permit request for a single family home, the location of that home is discretionary. If a attached ADU is proposed as part of the overall proposal, the location of the ADU is not discretionary, but the location of the single family home is.
All right, thank
And-
you. Thank you so much.
All right, great.
Terrific, thank you. And the only other item I had is that this evening, on item F3, I'll be recusing myself because I live within 500 feet of that development. So this is a heads up to Vice Chair Harris that I will hand it to you at that time to navigate through that item. Okay. So with that, I believe we are moving on to public comment. This is under public comment. The public may address the commission on any subjects not listed on the agenda and items listed under the consent calendar. Each speaker may address, and there it is on your screen, the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. So this is our first time this evening for public comment. Mr. Turner, thanks for leading us through.
No problem. I do see one hand at the moment, and as Chair DeCarty stated, if you do wish to give public comment, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, or if you're calling in, click *9. So our first speaker today, I will introduce Romain Tanier. Sorry if I butchered that. As a reminder, you will have 3 minutes to share your comment or question. Please clearly state your name, address, political jurisdiction in which you live, or organizational affiliation. If you have multiple speakers on the same account, please let us know and we'll make sure that everybody has their opportunity to speak. And you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. Yes, this is Romain Tanier, 7 Clarence Court, East Palo Alto residents. Dear commissioners, East Palo Alto Public Works is now actively working on Cavanaugh Drive rehabilitation and improvements. With the multiple planned Menlo Park development project along O'Brien and Adams, including the connection with Willow Village, comments have been provided in the last several years to improve pedestrian, bicycle, safety street improvements. It would be great to see a comprehensive detailed plan on execution timelines for the Menlo Park, O'Brien, Adams, Cavanaugh, Willow, University area at an upcoming relevant commission or city meetings. I would say that at a minimum, the continuation of the sidewalks between Cavanaugh Drive, East Palo Alto, and Cavanaugh Way, Menlo Park is long overdue and urgently needed. This should be pursued as soon as possible, especially that the Polytech building at the corner of O'Brien and Cavanaugh is now vacant. Thank you very much in advance for your support.
Terrific, and thank you for taking the time and for your public comment. Any others, Mr. Turner?
At the moment, no other hands raised.
All right, we'll give it just a minute. All right, how are we doing? Still none?
Still none.
All right, let's go ahead and close public comment. We'll then move on to our consent calendar this evening. We have 2 items, items E1 and E2. The first question is, would a commissioner like to pull one or both of those items from the consent calendar? So per a communication from Commissioner Tate, I'd like to pull E2 from the consent calendar. But we do not have E1 pulled. So the way we'll do this is we'll first vote on the remaining items, or in this case, item on the consent calendar, and then we'll go ahead and address the item that was pulled. So for right now, we're doing the consent calendar and simply the item that remains, which is E1. Do I have a motion? Vice Chair Harris.
I can make a motion to approve.
All right, moved. Do we have a second? All right, I'm happy to second. In alphabetical order, for the consent calendar, Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Doe,
Yes.
Vice Chair Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Riggs,
Abstain.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
I will go ahead and vote yes. So the consent calendar is approved, 5 yays with 1 abstention. And now to the item that was polled, which is E2, and I polled it. The reason I polled it is that according to Commissioner Tate, she was not listed as present in the meeting, but was present in the meeting, and in fact is identified through the course of the minutes. So I just wanted to verify with staff if that's the case. And it looks like she's not listed, but she's also not listed as absent. I guess this is item B in the roll call. So my proposal would be, per Commissioner Tate's communication, to add her as present in the meeting for the 25th of April, pending confirmation from staff, I guess, since Commissioner Tate isn't here. So I guess this is a question of staff.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. We'll just add her to the attendees. And so with that correction, a motion could be made to approve the minutes.
Great, that's my only change to that. So with that one change to the minutes from April 25th, do we have a motion for approval? Commissioner Doe?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a first. Do we have a second? Commissioner Harris, or Vice Chair Harris, apologies. So a first from Commissioner Doe, a second from Vice Chair Harris to approve the minutes with the one recommended addition as noted. Commissioner Barnes?
So I am not listed as being present on the 25th. And frankly, I don't remember if I was. The subject matter certainly is familiar as it relates to Willow Village. Let me look at the notes here to make sure that I might be referenced. So for the 20th, we're talking about the 25th, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so on the 25th, I see myself noted as having a comment, a very insightful comment, by the way, but a comment.
Of course.
Thank you. So there I am. So I am there. I'm not noted as being present, but I'm not noted as being absent. So if you could correct the record for that as well. If we have an agreement to do that, then I can vote yes.
All right, so in my best way to follow Robert's Rule of Order, I need the recommender and the seconder to agree to add, similarly to Commissioner Tate, that Commissioner Barnes was present, and to do that in the item B roll call section. Is that okay with you, Commissioner Doe?
Yes.
And Commissioner Vice Chair Harris?
I just want to clarify in your conversation with Ms. Tate that there weren't any other issues. I'm a little bit concerned if we have now 2 people who were missing. I'm wondering if I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm a little concerned.
Yeah. So Commissioner Tate sent an email to Ms. Sandmeyer and to myself as chair, noting this issue. This was the only one that she identified that she wanted to make sure was addressed. But I don't want to speak on behalf of Commissioner Tate about any other matter related to those minutes.
I mean, in that case, I might feel better waiting until Commissioner Tate is here. But I mean, I don't know. She was okay with everything else?
Again, I don't want to speak on her behalf. So, yeah. Ms. Sandmeyer, you want to, I would say it is a little concerning that two commissioners who were present were not identified as present, so I can understand completely a question about the minutes. How would you suggest we proceed?
We certainly could continue the minutes to another night. I will say that staff reviewed the minutes, although unfortunately we missed these two items, but they were reviewed. So I don't know if that helps.
I get. Can I make a
Vice Chair Harris, of
a different motion to continue these minutes until next time?
All right. So we have. We'll table the original motion, which needed to be amended. We have a motion from Vice Chair Harris to continue these minutes to a future Planning Commission date. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second that.
All right, Commissioner Barnes has seconded that. So with the first one tabled and this one with a first and a second, we'll go ahead with Commissioner Barnes.
Yes.
Commissioner Doe.
Yes.
Vice Chair Harris.
Yes.
Commissioner Riggs.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. So it's unanimous with the polled item E2 to be given to staff to check and present at a future meeting. Okay, with that, I believe we are through the consent calendar. And so this now moves us to item F, public hearing this evening. We have 4 items. The first one is a use permit at 729 Middle Avenue. This is a request for use permit to demolish an existing 1-story single-family residence and construct a new 2-story residence and detached garage on a substandard lot with regard to lot width in the R1U, that's single-family urban residential zoning district. And I believe I'm turning to you, Mr. Pruder. Do I have that right?
Good evening, Chair DeCardi. Yes, you do have that right. Good evening, everyone, planning commissioners and members of the public. I do not have any announcements for this particular item, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And following that, we'll have a brief presentation from the applicant and property ownership team. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Pruder. And to the applicant, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for hearing us today, this evening. I believe the homeowners are here, Delia and Chris. They wanted to make a brief homeowner statement. They're here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure. Can you see us?
Not yet.
You can hear us. Start video. Unable to start right now.
There you are.
Oh, here you go.
We can see and hear you. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Great.
Great. Well, I'm Chris, and this is Delia Snyder. I'm Chris Giannotti. We're a married couple, and we own the home at 729 Middle Avenue. And I just wanted to thank everyone assembled today to take the time to make a full consideration for our application. I'm a little background for myself. I was born in Menlo Park in 1955. I went to elementary school in Menlo Park. I've traveled the world and come back to live in Menlo Park years ago. Bought that particular property in 1991, and it's a small property, a small house of a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, less than 1,000 square feet. And Delia and I really wanted to, now that we're recently retired, wanted to build our home to live the rest of our lives in Menlo Park. And my mother still lives in Menlo Park, not far away. We just wanted to thank you and let you know that we're very committed to Menlo Park. So, with that, if there's any questions, happy to answer if anyone has any questions or comments.
Perfect. Thank you. I think we'll continue on the presentation and then go from there.
Thank you.
I just have just a little brief statement from our side. It's been a long road. It's been about 2 years with Chris and Delia that we've been down this path. Since they came to us with the desire to design and build their dream home. And after working diligently with the planning department and a few design concessions, we feel we've arrived at a design that not only satisfies a homeowner's criteria, but also will make a valuable addition to the surrounding neighborhood. So, available to answer any questions anybody may have. Turn it back over.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you to all of you for being here this evening. So for the commissioners, any clarifying questions before we go to public comment, either for the applicant or for staff on this project? All right, seeing none, although Commissioner Doe has some assistance now. Oops. Then let's go ahead, Mr. Turner, for public comment.
All right, at the moment, I do not see any hands, but again, if you would like to give public comment, please click the raise hand button on the bottom of your Zoom screen, or if you're calling in to tonight's meeting, click *9 on your phone.
All right, anybody, Mr. Turner?
Still nobody.
Okay. We do not have a large group of attendees this evening, so I will go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the dais for commissioners for discussion, comment, questions, and ultimately a motion. Who would like to begin? Commissioner Riggs.
Yes, thank you. I have a question just regarding the screening. I think it's on the left side of the property for the windows at the stair landing. I do see screening elsewhere, but perhaps the applicant could clarify what screening there is. I realize part of the adjacent home would be the garage, but I think it's hard to tell that that's a full overlap with the garage space only. So perhaps a little description there.
Sorry, my mistake. To clarify, you're referring to privacy screening in the form of, say, trees as they would apply around the garage?
That's correct.
So yeah, I think that we were pretty challenged with what we could remove. A lot of heritage trees on this property. And what we're showing there is there's not a whole lot of screening towards the neighbor to the rear or to the right side, if you will. But I do believe that we have some screening or some neighbor trees on their properties as well. I don't see, we didn't necessarily see that to be an issue, but we can certainly look at that further if so required.
Well, I think as staff are familiar, we are always concerned with a stairwell window, because the stair window is typically at the landing, which puts it at a particular view angle from the second floor and as you descend the stairs. And so it's a definite privacy challenge, possibly more than any other windows. And as staff knows, we always ask about what kind of privacy consideration there is for the adjacent home. So as I recall, the front of the adjacent home is a garage, but then at some point, since that seems to be a single straight line, and presumably beyond 20 feet, there would then be most often a bedroom window, and then a bathroom window, and then another bedroom window. It would be very helpful to know if there's existing screening on the adjacent property, although the setback does not look to be exactly huge. That would be helpful to know. And if then there is no setback, as Matt has probably told you, we typically ask for obscure windows. So if you could clarify, that would be helpful.
So I guess I need a little bit more clarification. You mentioned the stairs, and I was referring, my attention went to the garage, but are you referring to the interior stairs of the home?
Yes.
And that window, and the window, okay.
When I refer to the garage, I'm referring to the owner's property, understanding
okay.
that a privacy issue is not generally applied to a neighbor's garage.
Okay, I understand the proximity of the neighbor's garage to that. Right, so that window is fairly high. Let's see. I think it's about 5 feet off of the landing. So I can understand your concern when you're at the second floor and possibly looking out that window. I'm looking at the map, the Google map right now, and I don't necessarily see that is an issue. I think there is some privacy. There's some trees there on the neighbor's property, tall hedges, but it's hard to tell from that. It is a single story, I believe. Also, it's not a two-story. Speaking to the neighbor's property, that is.
Yes, that's the issue when it's a single story. That is when it's an issue. We can certainly look at some options for providing some screening there, or potentially just as you mentioned, making that an obscured, making the glass obscured in some way. Yeah, the lower, larger lights would probably be quite sufficient for that.
Yes.
All right.
If I may, through the chair.
Yes, Mr. Pritter.
Thank you. I just want to bring to the commission and the public's attention that the garage in question is indeed one story, but it is a two-story home neighboring this property at 727 Middle Avenue, I think the property in question. And I just wanted to point the commission and members of the public to the streetscape drawing on the screen I'm sharing to help kind of visualize what that kind of privacy impact might look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pritter. Mr. Riggs?
Yes, I noted that also, that what appears to be a second-story addition to a historically one-story home. When I look at the outline of the home as compared with the streetscape, it's evident that the first floor continues with a rather minimal setback, continuing the garage wall back. And just typically the ranch house layout would put a second or third bedroom behind the garage, then a bathroom, and then a corner bedroom. And then on the other corner of the house would be the master. So one has to presume that the stairwell window is somewhere not too far from the bedroom that would potentially be behind the garage, just in the typical plan. And not having better information than that, I just have to assume that there's a bedroom window conflict there. This is not at all unusual, and we frequently asked for a privacy consideration of one of three types: either raised windowsill, which of course is antithetical to a stairwell window, or planting, or the third option is obscured glass. And so I would have a proposal for what that might be when when it comes to making a motion here, and I'll be happy to make a motion when other people have had a chance to comment on the project.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Riggs. Commissioner Doe.
Okay. Thank you, Chair DeCarty. I wanted to ask about the removal of the Heritage Valley Oak that looks like it's in the way of the driveway. And I believe, Mr. Whitney, you had mentioned fine tuning and adjustments in the design. And I just wanted to hear more about if there, what you had considered, you and the owner had considered in terms of, is it possible to preserve that tree? In my amateur understanding of trees, oak trees are just amazing nurturers of biodiversity.
So yes, I mean, we went through, I think probably a large majority of our efforts were in regards to the heritage tree removal process. And we tried very hard to find a good balance between many things. Of course, we want to keep as many trees as we possibly can. Nobody wants to remove trees, but there are many factors that played into our process, and design was one of them. As placement of the home on the property, solar exposure. We do plan on putting PVs on this house, and it got to a point where the canopy on the property was just, it's too much, and we wouldn't have been able to really have an efficient solar system, PV system, if you will, with all of the shade on the property. We went round and round with that in mind, and these trees that we removed were those ones we chose to remove that we just really couldn't design with the best interests. We couldn't design with the best interests without removing those trees. So unfortunately, we have to remove some, and unfortunately, that was one that had to go.
Well, thank you. I know I can appreciate it's not an easy puzzle to figure out. So thank you.
Any other commissioner comments or questions? I have one following up on Commissioner Riggs's question about privacy. Can you remind us on the neighbor outreach, if the neighbor at that affected location responded with feedback based on the proposal and what that feedback was?
Can people hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I did connect with both neighbors early in the stage of this process, and showed them a full set of drawings that you have received as well, and explained to them, the height of the house, the depth of the house, and how it was situated relative to their homes. And I did receive responses from both of them in writing, which I can retrieve and share with anyone who likes to see, that they were aware and happy and pleased, and were approvable of the design. I even went so far as to say, note that there's a rear balcony off of our master bedroom, and where it will be situated relative to your backyards and your homes. And they specifically mentioned that as well, that was acceptable to them. So I can certainly share that if they think that's going to be helpful.
Actually, I think I found it in the packet. It's on page 57.
It is part of the, yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Other commissioner questions or comments on the project? Commissioner Riggs, you, I believe, were interested in potential motion on this project. This may be that time.
Yes, thank you. So I would like to first add to Commissioner Doe's comment, just an observation. I did a somewhat similar project in that it was a 50-foot wide lot and we added a second story with an existing very mature and very large oak tree that was near the property line, this on Peggy Lane in Menlo Park. And it was the client's specific request that if we could build around the tree, we would do that. But I understand that that is not always the request of the client. And so similarly with regret about the tree, I will nonetheless move to approve the project with the condition that the applicant work with staff to either determine existing screening between the proposed window and the nearest bedroom windows of the existing left side home, or to create obscured glass on the lower portion of the stairwell windows.
So we have a motion to approve the project as submitted with one change, which is that the applicant would consult with staff to develop an appropriate per staff perspective screening for that stairwell window, either if it is existing or to develop a solution. Do I have that right, Commissioner Riggs?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Would anybody like to comment on that or offer a second or an alternative motion?
If I may, for the chair first, sorry.
Of course, by all means.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about my camera. Just to clarify, Commissioner Riggs, what you were saying, I heard you mentioned the lowest glass of the stairwell window. Are you looking to lower half, or is there a specific portion of the stairwell in the situation where we need the frosted glass? I just wanted to further clarify that.
I'm referring to the lower light, and I think there are two adjacent windows, and so I wouldn't call it half, because if the architect prefers it to be 60%, that's what it should be. And I would not use the word frosted, because that narrows the options for obscure glass.
Understood. Thank you for that. I will keep that in mind for the condition. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so with that clarification on the condition again, so any other commissioner comment, questions? A second on the first made by Commissioner Riggs, or an alternate?
Yeah.
Not quite sure what to do here.
Oh,
commissioners want to help me out?
You're looking for a second?
Not necessarily. I'm just looking for another commissioner to move us forward. It could be a second, it could be an alternate proposal, or it could be a question or a comment.
Okay. Well, I'll take this opportunity to offer a second.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Barnes, thank you. All right, so with Commissioner Riggs's first as clarified by staff and seconded by Commissioner Barnes, does any commissioner have any questions or comments before we move to a vote? All right, I will say before we vote that we're seeing this project simply because it's on a substandard lot with regard to width. This is a project that if it had been a standard lot would have gone through as proposed by staff. I, from my standpoint, think about these things from equity across our city, and my interpretation would be to try to keep the alignment between what we do and what staff do in similar situations. So I just wanted to clarify about why I'll be voting no. I think it's a supportable project, and I certainly understand my fellow commissioners' point of view, but that's my perspective, and I wanted that to be clear to everybody. So with that, I will go in alphabetical order. Commissioner Barnes?
Yes.
Commissioner Doe?
No.
Vice Chair Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Riggs?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
I will vote no. And so it passes with 4-4, 2 against, and Commissioner Tate absent. Congratulations. Enjoy your home and continuing to be part of our community, and have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So with that, we will close item F1 and now turn to item F2. This is a use permit for 1170 May Brown Avenue. This is a request for a use permit to demolish an existing 2-story single-family residence and associated improvements and construct a new 2-story residence on a substandard lot with regard to minimum lot width in the RE Residential Estate Zoning District. The proposal includes a detached accessory dwelling unit, ADU, which is not subject to discretionary review. And I completely apologize. I've lost track of which. Is this you, Mr. Pruder, again with us? Sorry about that. Thank you and welcome back. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair DeCardi. You got me back to back here. Thank you very much. So yes, I do have one announcement for this item for the evening. And it is just that earlier that the applicant and a neighbor located at 1160 May Brown Avenue have been in discussion regarding a specific proposal to provide some screening trees. That there was a discussion regarding that to assist with some privacy needs and concerns from that neighbor. And the commission may wish to consider creating a condition of approval to that effect. And that is all for me in terms of updates and announcements, but I'm happy to answer any of the questions. And I would also add that we have the applicant team comprised of Nitin Handa and Jeff Winta, who are available as well for their presentation shortly thereafter. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. Any clarifying questions for Mr. Pruder before we turn to the applicant presentation? In which case, welcome to the applicant. We are in your hands.
Hey, Jeff, are you going to present something? Hey, Jeff, you're still muted.
No, I don't have a presentation, but I'm happy to respond to any questions or comments. I think the drawings stand well for themselves.
Sounds good. Mr. Honda?
No, even I don't have any specific presentation. You know, we have been in touch with the neighbors, and like Matt mentioned, there is only one specific item where, the neighbor on right side wanted to create some screening. Happy to work with them on that. We were doing some back and forth today, and seems like we were able to achieve some resolution on that.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Before we go to public comment, any questions of the applicant or back to Mr. Pruder from commissioners? All right, Mr. Turner, guide us through public comment on this item F2.
Alrighty, I do have a couple hands raised at the moment, but again, if you would like to give public comment, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or click *9 if you're calling into tonight's meeting. So first, I will introduce Jonathan Leblanc. As a reminder, you will have 3 minutes to share your comment or question. Please clearly state your name, address, political jurisdiction in which you live, or organizational affiliation. If you have multiple speakers on the same account tonight, please let us know, and we will make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. So Jonathan, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you very much. I am Jonathan LeBlanc. I live at 1180 Maybrown Avenue, which is the property to the left of the property under discussion. Spoken with the owner on multiple occasions and am fully in support of his project. We'd like to thank him for rearranging the grill area to protect additional trees that border my house. The one area of concern that I did have, we have talked about it, but I do want to raise it in this public forum, is parking and accessibility on the street. For those commissioners who are not familiar with Maybrown Avenue, it is an interesting street. It is half width. There are houses only on one side of the street, and there is little to no parking along the street. I caused, when we built this house about 3 years ago, I know that there were problems because the contractors were parked even though they tried to get as many cars as they could onto the property. We didn't end up blocking anybody because 1190 at the time was fairly empty. But now that 1170 is under construction, we are very concerned that we at 1180 could be blocked in and have restricted access to deliveries, to trash, recycling, etc. So we just want to make sure that there are plans to keep the street clear and accessible for all vehicles, that we're not trapped in and that people who are coming to our house are not blocked from getting on to the street. In addition, and this is probably outside of the purview of the Planning Commission, more part of Public Works, but I have been in contact with Mr. Torres of Public Works. We have a large problem on the street because people come from downtown Menlo Park, down Santa Cruz, think that this is a cut-through street, and then come zooming down the street and end up turning around in our driveway. Now, 1170 is going to actually have gates on their driveway, which means even more cars will be turning around in our driveway because they won't be able to turn around in 1170. And so if a request could be made to Mr. Torres to somehow do better with the signage that indicates that this is not a through street, it's no outlet. There is a no outlet sign that's posted, but it is actually hidden behind the oak trees. If those can be moved to where they're more visible, it will help not only during the construction process to prevent random cars from coming down and trying to turn around in a congested street, but even after, when the houses are built, keeping the street nice and peaceful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lang, for being here this evening and for your comment. Mr. Turner, I think you said we had at least one more comment.
Yes, at the moment we have one more hand, and I will introduce, it's simply Caitlin. As a reminder, you will have 3 minutes to share your comment or question. Please clearly state your name, address, political jurisdiction in which you live, or your organizational affiliation. If If you have multiple speakers on the same account, please let us know and we will make sure everybody has their 3 minutes. And Caitlin, you should be allowed to unmute yourself now.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes.
All right, so Caitlin is here. My name is Peter Hartwell. We live together at 1165 San Mateo, so the property directly behind the one we're discussing tonight. I'm a little surprised that Mr. Hanna didn't mention the conversations we've had by email about this. We're particularly concerned about 2 heritage trees, which are basically, one is on our side of the fence, one is on their side of the fence, but the drip lines overhang both of them. You know, if you read through the arborist report, it seemed pretty biased to me. All the trees were graded either a grade 2 or 3, poor or fair on the lot. All 17 non-protected trees are planned to be removed. What we're most concerned about is the placement as the ADU is clearly in the drip line of 2 heritage trees. One is a coast redwood tree, which has a diameter of 21 inches, and then the coast live oak on my property, which has a diameter of 33 inches. This is as heritage a tree as things get. It's a healthy, vibrant, large, big oak tree, doesn't lose its leaves, provides beautiful privacy shading that I want there, and I'm most concerned about this tree being impacted by the construction. So we've seen some amelioration proposed by their arborists. I've had discussion with other arborists in town. We're still worried about where it is, even with the root protections that are proposed. The lot is 28,000 square feet. They're proposing nearly 8,000 square feet of structures. What I'm asking is that the ADU be moved about 20 feet to the south, at which point it will still be in the backyard, still have the same setback near the fence, but be out of the drip lines of the redwood and the coast live oak tree that are back there. So if we don't do that simple change there, I think to me, it's going to beautify the backyard because now those trees will be part of the yard instead of hidden behind the ADU there. But if we don't do that, then we go back to the amelioration, which was in the arborist reports. And suddenly we're back to, you know, are we going to be able to see that the roots are actually covered correctly when the foundation is installed? Who does those inspections? Who is liable for that? In fact, the scariest thing to me says that the exposed pruned roots need to be covered in wet burlap that is wetted twice per day until backfilling can take place. So who makes sure that happens, right? This is a heritage tree. It's one of those things that's precious to our city. It's what makes Menlo Park, Menlo Park. And it's what we need to do to make sure we protect those. If you look at the impact of tree number 23, the arborist report says there is going to be moderate to significant impact of this tree. They recommend irrigation begin immediately. I don't know if that's even started. So today, I'm the Lorax. I'm speaking for the trees. Let the other 17 go. Let the other protected trees be impacted on the neighbor's lot line. I'm trying to save just one. So I think we can move the ADU and do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hartwell.
Yep.
Mr. Turner, any other public comments on this item?
We do. I'll now introduce Elisa. As a reminder, you will have 3 minutes to share your comment or question. Please clearly state your name, address, political jurisdiction in which you live, or your organizational affiliation. If you have multiple speakers on your account, please let us know and we will make sure everybody has 3 minutes. So Elisa, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you for being with us.
You're welcome. My name is Elisa Yaffa, and I am the other neighbor on the other side of Jonathan, 1160 May Brown Avenue. And I have a few things to add. One about the heritage tree question and concerns that were just expressed. I don't have anything to add there, but if they move the structure 20 feet south, it's being moved towards my property. And then I don't know if it affects anything on my end, on my side, but I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know how much room there is to move it. And if so, how that would affect any other tree or, but okay. I wanted two main things. One is I have been conversation with Nitin about screening. I'm very concerned about line of sight for their second floor, as they would have access to looking inside my first floor kitchen, dining nook, and family room, which is where we spend most of the time. So I appreciate his flexibility in adding trees, and am hoping that we would have actual screening of full height trees within 2 to 3 years time. Understanding that there is, it does take time for trees to grow, but requesting the fast evergreen trees, fast growing evergreen trees to be put line of sight for privacy screening. And Matt brought that up because I had a conversation with both Matt and Nitin earlier today. The other item is the street parking. I've asked Nitin not to have any of his construction crew or demolition crew park any vehicles on the limited parking in front of my house or across the street. And across the street, there should not be any parking anyway, because of how narrow the street is. But it's a very big hazard to have parking on the street when, because there's very little room to get cars out of their driveways. And the last time there was construction, I don't know if Jonathan knew this, but backing up, my mom hit one of the vehicles that was parked on the other side because there was no visibility on our side, and there were cars parked on the other side. So we'd like to avoid that. And I appreciate Nitin's commitment that there will be no parking on either side of the street where my house is. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for being here and for your comment, Ms. Siafe. Any further public comments on this item, Mr. Turner?
At the moment, I see Caitlin's hand up again. I'm not sure. Did mention there were 2 of them there. I don't know if it's the other person speaking from their account.
Okay. Perfectly fine to check as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Turner. If it's the same speaker, you can't on this item because you've had your 3 minutes, but if it's a different speaker on the same account, you may. And if you'd like to unmute yourself to clarify, that would be great.
Hi, it's Caitlin Dark, and I just want to clarify for the neighbor to the south of the property that there is absolutely no impact. There's no heritage trees over in that zone. If you move the ADU, it preserves 2 heritage trees. I know that you can move it and nothing is impacted. 2 heritage trees are preserved. If you move it, it's not in the drip protection zone and it doesn't impact that neighbor. And I don't even know why we're having this discussion. I've spent hours with the planning with Matt. I've talked to McClenahan, which is the premier arborist on the peninsula. He does not agree with these measures. And I don't even know why we're having this discussion. I've asked the developer, who is a developer. He's not a homeowner. If you look at his website, they develop properties all over the place. And I don't know why he can't just simply move the ADU. Nobody is going to be out there hand watering my tree roots twice a day. I've been on construction sites. When you put up mitigation, you put up tree protection, that's up day 1, down day 2, because it's annoying and it's in the way. You all have seen it. You all know. So who is it that's going to be looking at him hand watering my tree roots? And what's going to happen when my tree dies? Because that is the most valuable tree on my property. And I know why do we have the heritage tree ordinance? Why do we have a drip zone? Why do we have that if we're going to let them bypass it and build right on top of it? I don't understand. So I really hope that you will ask Mr. Handa's development company to move the ADU. He's building over 8,000 feet. He's covering 8,000 feet on a 28,000 square foot lot. can he please inch over the ADU, which what we know is really a pool house. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you for your comment.
Sorry, just to respond to, can I respond to that one?
Nope.
No.
No, this is public comment. We'll have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions as a commission. If the commissioner addresses you on a particular topic, then we can do it that way. But this is public comment right now. Thank you for your understanding. Mr. Turner, any more on public comment?
At the moment, I do not see any more hands raised.
All right, I think we've had time for folks to raise their hands. So I will go ahead and close public comment and we'll bring it back to the proverbial dais. This is a time for commissioners to comment, to ask questions, and ultimately to move towards a proposed course of action. Would any commissioners like to begin? Commissioner Riggs.
Yes, through the chair, I have a question for staff.
Sure.
And related to, but slightly different from earlier discussions tonight. The ADU placement, I believe, has to conform to non-discretionary code. Is the heritage tree ordinance specific enough to be a non-discretionary code, such that if the ordinance asks that we not build foundations within the drip line, that we can ask that an ADU conform to that ordinance?
Thank you for your question, Commissioner Riggs. I would like to just open with the point that this ADU is not subject to Planning Commission review. First and foremost, just to clarify, regarding the specific nature of the Heritage Tree Ordinance, I would like to defer to Acting Principal Planner and Planning Commission Liaison, Karina Sandmeyer, just to clarify how that interfaces with ADU regulations.
Yes, so the if there's impacts or potential impacts to a heritage tree from an ADU, it goes through the normal process as any other building would, with an arborist report submitted by the applicant and reviewed by the city arborist. So all of that is reviewed to make sure it's in conformance with the ordinance, whether it's an ADU or any other type of structure.
So from that, I should conclude that the ADU is in fact in conformance with our heritage tree ordinance, and that judgment has been made by the city arborist.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
If it's okay to just jump in on this topic, I guess, just to further clarify. So the city, if it's not an ADU, any decision made by the city arborist related to a heritage tree on a project that does come before us because we need to act on it, such as a substandard lot, is within our jurisdiction to act on. But because the state law is streamlining the process, it therefore stops with the administrative staff of the city and is not reviewable. That would mean by us in planning or by the city council. Is that the way I'm understanding the answer to Commissioner Riggs's question?
Well, let's see. So I think I want to add a few clarifications. So for example, if there's a single family home that requires a use permit and there's a tree that would conflict with the proposed location, but the tree is in poor health, then the city arborist can issue the heritage tree removal permit, and that's not subject to planning commission review because it's in poor health, so it could be removed anyway. So it's basically only items that are subject to planning commission review that if there's a heritage tree that's proposed for removal for development for an item that's subject to planning commission review, then it's discretionary. So it's not because, I wouldn't say it's because of the ADU state laws per se, it's because the ADUs are not discretionary unless they're asking for specific changes to the regulations, for example, a reduced front setback or something like that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I will say for myself, I am finding it hard to track this and to understand it. So, and it makes it difficult for me to know how to know exactly what our role is and then how to be consistent across different applications. So I appreciate the answers from both of you. I will just say this is perhaps on me, although I was on the Environmental Quality Commission for 2 terms and I was involved with heritage trees for a long time. So I'm not new to this question. So I'll just say that it's confusing and perhaps for consideration for some follow-up, perhaps something written down that we could understand, I would find helpful. So thank you. And to the other commissioners, thanks for letting me jump the queue there. It was just, since Commissioner Riggs had raised it, it was on my mind. All right, so broadening this back out, any commissioner comments, questions on any aspect of this project, questions of the applicant or staff, or ultimately moving toward a proposed course of action? Commissioner Riggs.
Yeah, thank you. I actually had a similar this project regarding screening trees, and that is just to get clarity on what is proposed.
Is that a question to staff, Commissioner Riggs, to Mr. Pruder?
That would be ideal from staff. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for your question, Commissioner Riggs. To begin with, following up on my announcement at the beginning of the item, we had a discussion between myself, the applicant, Mr. Honda, and the commenter earlier, Mrs. Yaffa, and it was regarding potentially providing screening trees to address this concern that was commented earlier in public comment along that right side shared property line between the subject property and the 1160 May Brown Avenue property. And the idea behind that that had come up was to potentially have 2 trees planted in that location at a 48-inch box size to potentially create the appropriate amount of growth to provide the screening. And the idea behind that was to create a condition of approval along those lines, potentially to help focus on that request, and then to have it be such that the responsibility would be in the hands of city arborists and planning staff to confirm the appropriateness in consultation with the applicant, of course, to make sure that the specific privacy desired is achieved with respect to the collection of second floor windows along that elevation.
Thank you very much. That helps, Mr. Pruder.
Other clarifying questions, comments from commissioners? Vice Chair Harris.
Okay, so back on the ADU and the tree, and I agree with Chair DeCarty that this is all very opaque and not always that easy to follow. So I guess at one point we mentioned the city council. So I guess my question is on ADUs, if say, for instance, this project did not pass, or let's say it did pass, would a neighbor be able to go to the city council and request a change in that based on the concern about loss of heritage trees? Or is that no, because it's an ADU? So it doesn't matter whether it's the planning commission or the city council. Question is staff, through the chair.
Yeah, so for example, if this project were approved and someone in the community would have the option to appeal it, if they have concerns about the trees being removed for the primary home, I suppose it can be appealed for any reason and then it goes to the city council, but the city council, like the planning commission, doesn't have discretion over the placement of the ADU.
Thank you. And I have another question. Am I able to ask the applicant if they considered moving the ADU to a different location, or am I not able to ask such a question? Again, question to staff.
Well, I suppose a question is okay. I think, yeah, it gets a little complicated because it can't really be part of the action, but yeah, I think a question is probably okay.
Okay, then through the chair, I have a question for the applicant. So I would like to know two things. One is, I'm not familiar with how, if we're attempting to preserve some trees and we do have to water every day on a neighbor's property, I don't understand how that works. Maybe I should. And then the second question is, did you consider moving the ADU in order to protect those two heritage trees?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. So first of all, we did consider that also what the neighbor sent to us. But if we move the ADU, it kind of creates a dead space for us where the ADU is currently. So it does occupy more lot space. And secondly, we have been in touch with our arborist and the city arborist, and there were multiple discussions on how to take extra measures to protect those trees because the neighbor was very concerned about it. So we took a step ahead, in terms of protecting the tree, especially the way the roots will be protected. And thirdly, the good thing is that the foundation is only going to be 18-inch deep there. We did an exploratory digging in that area. We didn't find too many roots. Everything is disclosed in the arborist report. And the foundation is only going to be 18 inches deep because the ADU is single story. So no significant risk was found with the roots, especially given the method of protection that the arborist has suggested, that we won't cut the root, we will kind of cover it through a burlap or some pipe when we pour the concrete. And also, just to clarify, my apologies to the neighbor also, they did mention that I didn't mention about their concern. And the reason I did not mention about their concern was because it was not a planning commission item. Therefore, I did not speak about it initially when I gave my brief presentation on the project.
Okay. And how are you going to be watering the neighbor's tree twice a day? Is that actually what you have to do, and how is that going to work?
I think what the arborist has suggested is watering. If the roots are exposed, then we need to water it. I think that's what the arborist has suggested. Most of the suggestions were around once we expose the roots, how we protect the roots. The exposed roots needs to be watered or kept wet, and once we are ready to pour the concrete, they need to be covered with some kind of pipe so that the concrete goes over it and the space is left for the root to grow and we don't really cut the root. Even though the pruning of root was also okay with the arborist, he was very clear that even if we cleanly prune the root and cut the root, it would not impact the tree because the amount of area impacted is very limited. But we did the extra step of, not cutting the root, and, we will cover the root with a kind of pipe or something, which the arborist has suggested. We went through all that with the city arborist also. Everyone was very convinced that these measures are very appropriate, in terms of protecting those trees.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments from the commission while commissioners are considering? Could I just ask Mr. Pruder, can you kind of confirm the tenor of that conversation with the city arborist? Is that a fair characterization of the city arborist's assessment?
Yes, that is. And I would also add that it was a bit of a back and forth exchange, and it was a little bit of an iterative process to reach that conclusion. It was not a very, I think, simple process that Mr. Honda and his team went through. So I would characterize that as well, that there was a bit of work to get to that conclusion that's been achieved in the arborist report.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners with comments or questions at the moment? Again, while people are considering, the questions I've had have been touched on, so I won't elaborate on the concern around the heritage tree and the placement of the ADU in our jurisdiction. Appreciate Vice Chair Harris at least saying that I might not be alone in my confusion, so thank you. So this is a question I have for staff about the ADU and the housing element. So we've submitted our housing element to the state for certification. And in the housing element, it counts expectations of a number of ADUs to be put in place in our city over the next 8 years, counting towards the provision of equitable and affordable housing that we are mandated by the state to deliver. My question is, if the development of this project happens through that 8-year period, will this ADU count towards that allocation that has been put in our housing element proposal?
I believe it would count, but I can double check with the team working on that housing element to confirm.
I would appreciate it if you could double check on that. Based on my understanding, that is my understanding that this would count. And I just want to note, although not germane to this project, but since we're talking about it, that I find it fairly incomprehensible that the clear ultimate use for this ADU would count towards affordable housing in Menlo Park. But that's a editorial comment on this. So other commissioner comments? Commissioner Riggs, you unmuted yourself, or questions, or yeah, Commissioner Riggs.
So you can see the unmute. I have to be careful. So it made me smile, the idea of whether or not we should count. By the way, I expect this ADU would end up being counted for the current cycle, not for the one that we're currently preparing. But it always amuses me when we talk about housing in Menlo Park and about it having anything whatsoever to do with affordable housing. I mean, the only time we have affordable housing is when we have subsidized housing. That's BMRs. And anything built on the market. I mean, when a 250 square foot ADU in San Mateo goes for $2,500 and up, one in Menlo Park is $3,500 probably. So I don't know, it just makes me smile. But anyway, it's good to have additional units. I did look at this site plan and wonder how a renter would be walking through the property to get to the ADU. But I was entirely distracted by the mere fact that on Little May Brown, we're building an 8,200 square foot property. but it's within our ordinance. It's fully within. In fact, just in order to sort of bring this to its inevitable conclusion, I will move to approve the project as described in the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs, and I also appreciate your comment. Commissioner Thomas.
I definitely want to leave time for others if they'd like to comment, but I am happy to second the motion by Commissioner Riggs to approve this project when we are ready to make a vote.
Good. There's plenty of time for comments still, but we have a first, which is to approve as submitted from Commissioner Riggs, a second on that motion from Commissioner Thomas. Any other commissioners like to make comments before we move toward vote on this item? Commissioner Barnes.
Yes, my disappointment is in the removal of the heritage trees, and the blunt instruments that are intended to create more housing, which in effect have some deleterious impacts on, municipality by municipality, in this case, Menlo Park. I think there's a lot of ways to address this, and I don't think this was an optimal outcome. So I have profound disappointment in that particular piece of it. Thank you.
If I may, through the chair, I'm sorry.
Sure, Mr. Carter, that's fine.
I just would like to make a quick clarification that no heritage tree removals are proposed with this project. There have been no heritage tree removal permit applications. There are non-heritage sized trees that are being removed, but the way that the arborist report has been characterized in the plan set, it is proposed to maintain and preserve all of the heritage trees on site and the others in the neighboring properties that were also measured in the arborist report. Thank you.
Good.
So thank you for that. So I stand corrected. Did I, was I in a parallel universe here for the understanding that there's going to be a removal of 2, or it was just the mitigation measures associated with 2 through the chair?
It was the mitigation measures associated with the 2.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yep.
I stand corrected. Thank you.
Other questions or clarifications before we move to a vote? All right, in alphabetical order, we're going to come back to you, Mr. Barnes.
Yes.
Commissioner Doe.
Yes.
Commissioner Harris.
No.
Commissioner Riggs.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
I will vote yes as well. The proposal passes. Congratulations. Good luck with the project. And I know you've heard the concerns about traffic, and we'll continue out. This is out of our jurisdiction, but continue to work with the city so that the neighbors have that throughout the project. Best of luck to you with the project.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, with that, I will close item F2. We'll move on to item F3. I can actually read this, and then we'll go to my recusal. This is a use permit at 510 Pope Street to request for a use permit to demolish an existing 1-story residence and construct a new 2-story residence on a substandard lot with regard to minimum lot area and width in the R1U. That's the single family urban residential zoning district. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, I live within 500 feet. I have no connection to the project. I'm not in conflict with the project, but for matters of transparency and clarity, I'll just go ahead and recuse myself. What that means is I will still listen as if I remember the public. I will turn my camera off and turn over to Vice Chair Harris to lead us through this. And at the conclusion of this item, as we move to item F4, I'll come back and pick up from there. So with that, Vice Chair Harris, the gavel is yours.
Thank you, Chair DeCarty. So, I see Ms. Khan has joined us. I believe this is your project. Is there a do you have anything to present, or is there a presentation by the applicant?
Good evening, Vice Chair and members of the Planning Commission and members of the public. There is an update to the staff report under trees and landscaping. That portion, there's a mention of tree number 5 being on the subject property. That is incorrect. Tree number 5 is actually a street tree in front of the subject property. So I just wanted to clarify that. And also we have the applicant and a homeowner, Mr. Rico Huo, who will be giving us a brief introduction to himself and a presentation as well. With that, I am here to follow up with any questions that the commissioners may have. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. We'll hear the presentation by the applicant.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Rico Huo. I'm the property owner and I'm an architect by profession. So by default, I'm the project architect as well. And thank you for the opportunity to present the application tonight. I prepared a slideshow and I'll just very quickly go through it and be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So I'll start that. Okay. Do I have full control? To remove controls, click to start. You can control it. I apologize. Let's see if I can. Oh. I'm applying, let me go back. There's a slight delay on a slide. 510 Pope Street is a property that's located in the Willows, towards the northern side of the Willows neighborhood. And I'm applying for a use permit for a new 2-story single-family home. The lot is 50 feet wide by 120 feet deep, and it's considered a substandard, and therefore we're applying for the use permit. Here is, the slide is, okay, there you go. All right, here's a site map. It illustrates that on the side there, this is an infill lot with properties on 3 sides of it. And quickly, this is a picture of the building that's on the neighbor on the left side, and the building on the right side, the 1-story ranch. And this is the proposed elevation of the property. I'm proposing a modern farmhouse architecture, and I believe it will blend in very well with the existing neighborhood. And in fact, I drew inspiration of this architecture from a couple homes nearby. Here's a quick snapshot of some homes nearby, traditional, mainly single story mostly, and some 2 stories with craftsman Spanish and some modern architecture. This is 42 Laurel Street, just around the corner. This would be one of the home that I kind of drew inspiration from. It's got dark roof. The body's, light color, white, and with dark roof lines and window sashes. This is 501 Laurel, also around the corner, and very similar. And the house itself, the design, I have a lower roof that wraps around the building to kind of break up the vertical scale, and the side of the building steps back to allow more, give some relief to the neighbors next door. In the design, there were 2 main consideration from the start. You can see from the picture, this is existing home right now, and there's a large oak tree in the front, and the preservation of this oak tree is one of the primary concern. Its second is privacy to the neighbor's yard. here is a side-by-side view. This is the existing building. The building footprint comes around 25 feet from the front of the property. And this is a proposed, this is 25 feet right here. And we step back another 5 feet to give more leeway for the large oak. And placement of the driveway, the existing driveway is on the right side. And we're proposing the driveway on the left away from the redwood. I mean, pardon me, the red oak. For privacy to the neighbors, in an infill lot, that's always a primary concern. And I purposely placed all the larger windows and openings. Here's our first floor plan. To the back, and to the front, and leaving smaller window openings to the side. So same thing on the second floor. Larger window openings are towards the back and the front of the property, and small 2'6", 2'6", 2'6", small windows to the side. And that is pretty much the design. And I have made neighborhood outreach effort by meeting personally with the neighbors on Pope Street immediately to my site, across the street sides. Also send the plans with project description letter to the adjacent neighbor on Laurel Street, and address some of the issues one of the neighbor brought up. My neighbor, Ms. Haddock, at 514 Pope Street, about mass privacy and noise. And excuse me, with the mass, I actually put in the story poles for building corners along the side of the property to kind of illustrate where the footprint is going to be. For privacy, I deleted a window facing her property, and also proposed to plant some trees along the backyard as a green screen. Noise, we have made the window facing her side fixed window instead of operable. These two actually in the master bedroom, and she's satisfied with the adjustments that we made. So, and with that, I will yield back to Vice Chair and open to any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for coming and presenting your project. Before we go to public comment, are there any clarifying questions from the commission? Okay, Mr. Turner. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Riggs.
Yeah, thank you. I did want to check, just because the wording in the staff report referred to divided light windows as simulated divided light. In the past, staff has used the phrase true simulated divided light, or simulated true, I don't remember which. So could I just clarify that these are grids on the inside and outside of the glass, and a corresponding grid between the panes? And I guess I could direct through the chair, direct that to the applicant.
Yes, if I may.
Go ahead.
Okay, there you go. Got to raise my hand. Yes, it's simulated divided light. So the grid will be both on the inside and outside, plus usually an aluminum bar. It's a dual glazing.
Yes.
Glass. So it's actually, it's not true 4 pieces of glass. It's 1 piece of glass with mullions on the inside and outside.
We understand. We understand.
So
okay,
that's what it is. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to hear. And then also the Carolina cherry that's proposed for screening, I'm just curious, is that a species that's evergreen?
Yes, it is. And it's a standard. It's a standard, relatively fast growing, dense foliage, lollipop shape tree.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Are there do any other commissioners have any clarifying questions at this time? Okay, so now if we could go ahead, Mr. Turner, and call for public comment on this item.
I don't see any hands raised at the moment, but if you would like to give public comment on this item, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, or if you're calling in to today's meeting, press *9.
Okay, I think there's been opportunity. So I would like to close public comment and bring it back to our virtual dais. And if any of the commissioners would like to make some comments or have questions for staff or the applicant. Commissioner Barnes.
Thank you. I would like, thank you, Chair, Vice Chair acting as Chair. I would like to thank the applicant for their thoughtful approach to presenting this project to the Commission and walking us through it. That's much appreciated. I'll note on this project that the proposed residence is meeting all zoning ordinance requirements for setbacks, lot coverage, FAL, daylight planning, parking, and height. I think that the project is well designed. I think that the project fits with fits Menlo Park writ large, and I think it fits well on Pope Street. I think it'd be a welcome addition to the neighborhood, and for that reason, without looking to deter any other commissioner comment, I will put a first on the floor to approve the project as per the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnes. Commissioner Riggs.
Yeah, thank you. I have to be consistent and ask about screening on the stairwell side, right side property line. Perhaps Mr. Hull could just clarify how those windows work.
May I respond to Commissioner Riggs' question?
Please.
Okay. Yes, so the stairs does have a window there. First, I'd like to just point out window there. It's at the landing. It's transitory, so it's going in, up, and down. It's not someone that stays in that spot on a extended period of time. Number one. Number two, the sill height is called out about 4'6" or 4'4". I can't remember. What you look down is on my neighbor to the right, the one-story ranch house. And currently, the side yard at that neighbor's side yard has, I believe, English laurels that's taller than the fence, 6-foot fence itself. And so it's providing quite a bit of a screening to the rooms in that house. As a way to increase privacy, I think one way I can do this is to raise the sill height perhaps to another 5'6". So this way it reduces the amount of direct visual contact as you walk by the stair landing or and onward up to the second floor. I don't know if you have any thought on that as a way to mitigate the screening issue.
Through the chair, I wouldn't want to ask for belt and suspenders if the English laurel is situated in such a way to provide some screening for the neighbor. I mean, that's one of the three options we have for years asked for. So I consider that responded to, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Riggs. Commissioner Barnes, your hand is still up. Do you have a new comment?
I do not, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we have a first on the floor. Oh, Commissioner Thomas.
Yeah, maybe that's poor timing. I definitely want to give all the other commissioners an opportunity to voice their opinion. I concur with Commissioner Barnes. See any reason not to, approve this project. So I will be a second to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Did any other commissioners have a comment before? Otherwise, we'll go to a vote. Okay. Well, we have a first and a second. So I would like to take the roll, and we'll start with Commissioner Barnes.
Yes.
Commissioner Doe.
Yes.
Commissioner Riggs.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes. And
I will also vote yes. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with yes votes, 1 absent and 1 recused for this item. So I think this closes this item, and we can move to F4 and bring back our fearless Chair DeCarty.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. Good luck with your building.
And thank you, Vice Chair Harris. With closing of item F3, we move on to item F4. This is a use permit for 90 La Loma Drive, a request for a use permit to demolish an existing 1-story single-family residence and detached garage and construct a new 2-story residence on a substandard lot with regard to minimum lot width in the R1S single-family suburban residential zoning district. This project includes a request for excavation within the side setback. The project also includes an attached ADU, which is not subject to discretionary review. And let me go ahead and turn it over to staff on this. And Mr. Turner, this must be yours this evening.
Yes, this is mine. I do not have anything to add to the staff report at this time. Happy to take any questions.
Terrific. Any questions for Mr. Turner before we move to the applicant? Mr. Riggs.
I apologize, Mr. Turner, if I misread. It would not be the first time, but I wasn't sure whether the text of the staff report on page 2 was referring to the right side setback as 10 feet or 16 feet. Could you just clarify? I think that was in the middle of the second page.
Let me scroll to it. If it was talking about the right side, excuse me, if it was talking about the right side setback, the required setback is 10 feet for the main house. And then the proposed setback for the main house is at, I believe it's about 16 feet, if I remember correctly. Yes, 16 feet 9 inches for the right side setback for the main residence. The attached ADU would have a 4-foot setback, which is allowed under the ADU regulations.
Yeah, thank you. I think I just misread that somehow.
Any other clarifying questions from commissioners before we turn to the applicant? All right, seeing none, do we have a presentation or comments from the applicant this evening?
Yes, we do. I'm Joe Gardella for Anna Williamson Architect. For some reason, I can't turn my video on, but we are excited to, oh, there we go. Hello. We are excited to be here tonight with our clients, Mike and Jen Kramer, who are also here, and I'll turn it over to them in a second, but our office has done lots of projects here in Menlo Park, and with this one, we're excited to continue that trend and increase vitality and beautiful architecture into the community, and also bring wonderful clients and people and families into the community to help create, this vibrant community that we all love of Menlo Park. So thank you to our clients specifically for allowing us to do that, but also you all on the commission for helping make sure that happens in a good and meaningful way for the community. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
If you have anything you want to add.
Yes. Hi, I'm Mike Kramer.
And I'm Jen Kramer.
Thanks for having us tonight. We appreciate the hard work and the good job that staff has done so far with our project. We love Menlo Park and we're very excited to be building our dream home on La Loma Drive. We have 2 young sons that are 3 and 5 years old, and we bought this home a little over a year ago to raise our family in this great community. Our goals for the project include being good neighbors and creating a positive contribution to the neighborhood. And when selecting our design team, we prioritize that our architects and landscape architects are both based in Menlo Park and have many years of experience designing homes in Menlo Park. We reached out to all our immediate neighbors several months ago before submitting our planning application with the city to share our plans and get feedback from our neighbors. We're excited to be an integral and positive part of our neighborhood. We're also excited to include an ADU, which we plan to rent out and do our small part to increase the local housing supply. So thank you very much for your time and consideration tonight, and please let us know if you have any questions.
Great, thank you for being here this evening. So with that, commissioners, any clarifying questions for the applicant before we turn to public comment? All right, seeing none. Mr. Turner, are you doing double duty here?
I am doing double duty.
All right.
On this one. Okay, so at the moment, I do not see any hands raised, but if you would like to give public comment on this item, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, or if you're calling in to tonight's meeting, click *9 on your phone keypad.
All right, let's give it a second. All right, I take it no raised hands?
No raised hands.
All right, let's go ahead and close public comment. We'll bring it back to the virtual dais for commissioners for questions, comment, and ultimately proposed path forward. Who would like to begin? Commissioner Doe.
Thank you, Chair DeCarty. I don't have a comment on the architecture. If I may, I wanted to comment on the choice of synthetic turf, I believe, in the backyard. And given the extreme drought we are in, it makes total sense to decrease the need for irrigation. But I just wanted to point out that synthetic turf is a plastic product usually, I believe, and its degradation over time leads to microplastics shedding, entering the water supply, and it being synthetic, it creates a barrier to, insects, worms, and so it doesn't promote soil health and supporting life. And even though it doesn't obviously affect neighbors, like issues of privacy, I feel like it does affect the community, even if not visibly, through its potential to worsen heat island effect or, not promote urban biodiversity, even at a micro scale of soil health. So I just wanted to ask the applicant if you would consider a non-synthetic alternative to your turf, like silver carpet, that I believe is drought tolerant and creates very walkable ground cover. I believe that would be an appropriate surface for running around and playing, as I'm sure 3-year-old and 5-year-old boys like to do. Thank you.
I think from our perspective, we appreciate that concern, and it's something that we are aware of to some extent. I'm not an expert on kind of lawns, whether synthetic or natural, but that is the only portion that we had considered, and all of the other vegetation and potential grass area is intended to be natural, but partially because of the scale and irrigation concern was why we had spoken with our landscape architect about that possibility. But we're happy to speak with him again. Unfortunately, he hasn't joined this evening, but discuss the different alternatives that may be available alongside the synthetic possibility.
Thank you. And the landscaping otherwise is lovely. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Doe. Other commissioners with questions or comments at the moment? Well, people are considering, I'll step in then. I have a question which is referenced in the staff report about the mistaken removal of the heritage tree, I think number 70. And I guess I would just love to have a clarification or understanding of how has that happened in the ownership of the property and the development of this proposal. I understand the staff report. I think in the arborist report, the original one identified it as a heritage tree and said that it was not slated for removal. So just wanted to get clarification about that process, about how it ended up inadvertently, I guess, being removed.
So I can speak to the arborist report portion of that. So the original arborist report had that tree, and the survey as well, had that tree undersized as a non-heritage tree. Between the time of submitting the project and the town arborist coming out to the site to review for various reasons, after that review, the owners, I believe, had some cleanup done on the site in terms of trimming some hedges, and at that time took out the tree because it was not noted as a heritage tree at that moment. A few days later, we received word from the town arborist that they were going to consider that tree a heritage tree at that point. But the tree had already been inadvertently removed in anticipation of the project and also general cleanup and maintenance of the site.
Mr. Turner, can you shed some light on your understanding of the history on this?
Yeah, just to give a little additional background on it. As Joe said, our our city arborist did have a chance to go out there and inspect the tree because it was right on the edge, according to the original arborist report. So when our city arborist inspected the tree, she did find that it was in fact heritage size. She did note that it was in poor health and at some point in time kind of been pruned to a hedge anyway and was not of very high value. So she did end up approving the heritage tree removal permit retroactively based on the value criteria, the tree health criteria. Yeah, there was a little bit of a slight delay between the time that we were able to inspect the tree and when comments formally were given to the applicant. So it was a bit of a timing issue in terms of removal. But we did, like I said, have a chance to inspect the tree, and it wasn't a very, great, it wasn't a great specimen, which led to the approval of the heritage tree removal permit.
So, I mean, I'm not trying to get into the inquisition on this, but it is confusing to me. So there's an arborist report that's submitted in April. It's revised in June. I don't know what that means. I don't know. I guess we're looking at the revised version. That arborist report, I think, identifies number 70. And I think in our packet, which is whatever that is, F6, page 292, I'm looking at tree 70 and it says, none of these trees are recommended for removal at the time of the survey. So, and again, not to get sort of looking at history on this, but it's frequently surprising to me that the city arborist goes against the arborist report in the direction of poor health. It usually goes the other way on these things. So that's confusing to me. And I suppose to everybody, I just want to understand this, but you can appreciate that it makes a property easier to develop and more economical development if the inconvenience of a heritage tree is out of the way. So that's unfortunately what I'm trying to understand. So, and I'm not sure I still get it. So if there's an original arborist report that was in April, then when did the cleanup on the site happen? And that happened in between just a few days when the city arborist came out to take a look and before the city arborist came back with their final determination?
I'm not aware of the exact timeline of the day of the week that these things happen, but I do know that the arborist report that was the final report that was submitted was updated based on the town arborist's comments of including that tree as a heritage tree. Now, I'm not sure why the arborist report would say that that particular tree was not slated to be removed, because in our entire kind of duration of the project, that bay tree at the front of the property has always been slated to be removed to make way for the attached ADU, and keeping the ADU closer to the front of the street to allow easier access for renters. So I'm not sure why that arborist report says that, and I'd have to double check our records to understand that a little bit more.
So there's just, from my standpoint as a planning commissioner, there's just not an answer to this question. Is that where we are? That there was a tree that was a heritage tree that got brought down, and should have at least stayed for consideration about why it should be removed. Although perhaps since there was an ADU placed on it, it would have been removed anyway. And per our earlier discussion, we can't opine about that. But is that where we stand on this? I guess I'm asking this to you, Mr. Turner.
It is a little bit difficult to say, but at the moment we do have a heritage tree removal permit that was approved by the city arborist for tree health reasons. And the city arborist has also signed off on the remaining project in terms of tree protection measures and landscaping.
Okay, this has been a frustrating night with city arborist conversations for me, and especially this one. So in my tenure here as a planning commission, we've stopped a project because of a heritage tree and something like this. We've delayed it because of something like this. And so again, from where I sit in terms of consistency with other property owners, the heritage tree, just back to a comment made earlier tonight, the heritage tree ordinance either exists for a reason or it doesn't. And if it's simply as a box checking to be done on this, then I'm not sure why we have it and to pay attention to it. So this is just hugely frustrating to me, but there's nothing that we can do about it. So I'm done with my portion of that conversation. Other commissioners with questions or comments about this project, and again, ultimately moving toward a proposal for a pathway forward. Commissioner Riggs.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess this would be a question for the architect. I'd like some clarity on what the potential screening would be if there's equipment on the roof, and what the approval process of that would be. Just given the slope, if equipment is placed on the roof of this project, it will be visible, I believe, from the at least one neighbor. And so it would be very helpful to have a plan in advance of that possibility.
Yeah, the simple answer is that there is no equipment planned to be on the roof. All the AC equipment, heat pumps, those will be placed behind the kitchen. There's a clear story window behind the kitchen on that property side, and they will be placed down at ground level there.
All right, so I appreciate that. And then a question to Mr. Turner. If there's a subsequent desire to have roof equipment for any reason, would city code guide us and guide the applicant to come back to the city in order to place it as a modification of a use permit?
There would be, the roof screening would be reviewed at the building permit stage. Generally, rooftop equipment is required to be screened to eye level. So if, for example, if an AC unit is 2 feet tall, the screening would have to be 2 feet tall. And then there's our associated noise limitations to that as well that differ from the normal noise ordinance. And so that would be reviewed at the building permit stage typically.
So when you say reviewed, this would be reviewed by planning staff for aesthetics. I'm just concerned that the roof screening, just because this issue got raised, and if it hadn't been, we wouldn't be asking, but the roof screening could potentially be corrugated steel. It could be lattice. It could, be any number of things that is sold at Home Depot, that the mechanical equipment guy could decide that, oh, I guess it's my job. I don't have it in the budget. I'll just have to throw something on there. So I just wanted to know that planning is going to take a look at it in aesthetic terms.
We could definitely look at it in terms of materials to make sure they're appropriate with the rest of the house and fit into the rest of the house.
All right. Just one, because I'm not familiar with the staff process in that case. And that's all I needed to know. And with that, I'm happy to make a motion to approve the project as it's presented in the staff report to approve the use permit.
Great. We have a first from Commissioner Riggs to approve. Commissioner Thomas.
I'm happy to second that motion.
Commissioner Thomas is seconding that motion. Any questions or comments before we move that to a vote?
If I could have one comment to my second. So Chair Riccardi, I think you asked some really great questions about the situation with the tree. You know, that is like one wrinkle in an application that I think otherwise is pretty clear. That being said, it does seem like it was inadvertent, and you know, it's plausible quite frankly, that this was kind of an innocent mistake. And I guess one property, thinking like on kind of a global sense, how we want to be consistent in enforcing the rules, and why have these rules if we're not going to enforce them. I think one thing to this project's credit is ADUs and how they help with the housing crisis. So when I weigh these together, you know, I'm going to approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Other commissioner comments or any questions before we move to a vote? All right, I will say, just to clarify on my statement, I think this is an eminently approvable project. Really appreciate the ADU and lovely that you're going to rent it. That's fabulous. And again, for consistency, the only reason we're seeing this is because it's a substandard lot by a little bit on the sides. So for me, I think this is an eminently approvable project. I think my frustration is with application of our heritage tree ordinance at the you know, we're all responsible for this, but between City Council, us, Environmental Quality Commission, and staff, I'm frustrated with how the heritage tree approval ordinance is being implemented just by these examples that we've had this evening. But this doesn't say anything about my belief this is an eminently approvable project, and I think will fit in great in the community. So with that, moving toward a vote in alphabetical order, Commissioner Barnes.
Representing the Bs, I vote yes.
Commissioner Doe.
Yes.
Vice Chair Harris.
Yes, and I also appreciate that you'll be renting out that ADU. Thanks.
Commissioner Riggs.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
I will vote yes as well. Congratulations, enjoy your new home, and continuing to be part of Menlo Park, and have a great evening. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for your patience this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was item F4 on our agenda. That concludes our public hearing for this evening, closing that and moving on to item H, which is informational items. And for that, I will return to Ms. Sandmeyer.
Yes, good evening again. So the next Planning Commission meeting will be August 29th. We have two single family home use permits on that agenda. And that concludes my updates, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or follow-up from Ms. Sandmeyer? Vice Chair Harris.
Yeah, I just noticed that I'm wondering if you know what's going to happen at the September 12th or have an idea of what might occur on the September 12th meeting.
Yeah, unfortunately, that one is pretty much in flux. There could be a variety of projects that are on that agenda or not. So I know that can make it more difficult, but unfortunately, I don't have more specific information at this point.
Okay.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, one thing I just want to throw out there at this point in the meeting, it seems like the last two commission meetings, issues with heritage trees and ADUs have come up. So I just want to kind of pull the rest of the commission. Would it make sense? Is there anything that we could schedule for future meetings that might lead to more clarity on this issue, or which might give us, more degrees of freedom to, act in these ambiguous cases? So I just want to put that out there to see if that resonates with any other commissioners.
I'll speak for Ms. Sandmeyer. I think we can't actually have a discussion about this because it hasn't been agendized, but you can absolutely make that point directly to Ms. Sandmeyer for consideration, and we can all hear it. Do I have that right, Ms. Sandmeyer?
Yes, I think that's fine. And
generally, I'm happy to talk about it. I was just trying to, I should have just turned over to you to see if it's okay for us to have this discussion.
Yeah, it should be agendized. And I think probably the best path, if a commissioner is interested in adding an item to the agenda, is to make the request through the chair, who will then work with staff. I hope that helps.
Yeah, terrific. So Commissioner Tom, I in no way wanted to preclude your point at all. So is that okay, or do you? I think we take from this.
Thanks for clarifying.
Your suggestion is that.
Thanks for clarifying.
Your suggestion is that we should take a look at the intersection of our heritage tree policy and ADUs and understand what we are essentially allowed and not allowed to do, and get clarification if I have that, and it would be good to get that at some point. And if we could agendize that, or if we can get follow-up from staff or the city attorney, that would be great. So, and I'm both summarizing Commissioner Thomas, but also reiterating a point I made before. So I agree with that. Commissioner Barnes?
So I'll make a comment, and it's not intended for, it's not intended to be a question. So maybe I can steer clear of making this a dialogue on this particular subject. I will add that in addition to the intersection of heritage trees and ADUs, there's the general intersection of heritage trees and the approval to remove for development reasons, and without weighing in on good or bad, but that still is slightly murky. And there was changes to the heritage tree ordinance, I think going back either right before or during the pandemic. And that can use a brush up as well in terms of how that all shook out and what's the basis for when it's okay to remove in order to get a house done versus not. And I will say, for one, I'm not entirely clear on how that decision tree works within the city and the city arborist and so forth. So I'll add that to a potential bucket of discussion within the overall bucket that we were discussing. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnes. Any other questions or follow-up with Ms. Sandmeyer this evening? All right. So seeing none, I will close item H, and that only leaves our adjournment, which I will do at 9:19. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your evening and your week. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.